treat me like as if I'm a one night stand. When you know my heart's love for you run real deep. When you keep the love I desire far from me. Yeah, you expect much more than you're willing to give.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Street Therapy. I'm Tyra Jackson, your host, and today's special guest is Najee Ali. He's the CEO and the founder of Project Islamic Hope. It's a civil rights organization right here in Los Angeles, California. Welcome, Najee.
Thanks for having me, Tyra. It's a pleasure being on your show.
Thank you so much for stopping by. You know, it's a pleasure. I've been wanting to have you in the studio for a very long time. You know, me and you we talk back and forth on Facebook, and you're like, oh, just, you know, let me know when. So, again, you know, thank you for taking the time to come and talk to your girl. No,
thanks for having me. I've actually seen your show on YouTube. I've enjoyed it. And so for me to be here sitting next to you, it's like a dream come true.
Oh, see, you know what? Now I need to keep you in my pocket, so when I'm having a good day, I can pull it out and listen to that all over again. So with that being said, could you give us a little bit of background of your organization?
Well, Project Islamic Hope, acronym HOPE stands for Helping Oppressed People Everywhere. So for us, it doesn't matter what race or religion that you are, we're going to make sure we come to your aid and try to fight for your social justice. So we've been in existence for over 20 years here locally in Los Angeles. Usually whenever there's a need or a crisis in our community, my group works with others collectively to make sure we can stand up and address the issue, to make sure we can improve the quality of life.
Oh, I love it. And as long as I've been living in Los Angeles, I hate to even say, but I always have to keep it, 100%. I used to hear about, Najee Ali, on the radio. And, even though I heard your name, I didn't really know, who you are and what you represent. And that led me to believe that it's really important to know who our community leaders are. So can you tell me why is it important that we know who our community leaders are?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Tyra, everyone in the community is a leader. It's just not up to one person, one individual, one group or organization. It's up to us collectively to show leadership in our community, and that begins inside the home with the mother and the father. Then it extends to the children who are out in the community, as well as the school teachers at school. So I believe leadership is about being a collective unit. It's not up to one personality or individual. Obviously, I've been an activist for over 20 years from South Central Los Angeles, and I am on the front lines, but I'm just one person. I'm joined by many others, such as my mentee, Reverend K.W. Toulis of the National Action Network, Marquise Harris Dawson, the Community Coalition, so many other groups that we work with, ranging from the NAACP to the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Community Coalition. So it's not one person, but it's a collective unit that's going to make it happen for all of us.
And I definitely appreciate it. That's why I think it's so important, because a lot of us, we're so used to getting up, going to work every day, and we may not even look at the news. And I think it's really important to know what's going on. And I could say, just within the past couple of years, I just really started paying attention to what's going on. And one of the main concerns that I have is what's happening with our LAPD, and not just within Los Angeles, but nationwide. Could you speak?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And when you talk about the news media, they show what they want to show. And I'm speaking in context to the tragic murder of Michael Brown, the young unarmed African-American youth who was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri a few weeks ago. And while the media fixated on Michael Brown, and many folks in South LA were wondering what was going on, and they kept up to date by watching the news about the protests that were going on right here in South Central LA. I think it was 2 weeks later, we had our own tragedy where Ezell Ford, a young unarmed African-American from South Central, was shot and killed by the LAPD. Yet that shooting death got little attention as it related to Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. So we can't let the media dictate what we fight for and what our issues are going to be. We want to make sure that if something happens in South LA, that we're not distracted by what's going on elsewhere throughout the nation, even though we should support that cause and solidarity for the activists. We must fight our own fights here at home first. So that's why, for me, the murder of Ezell Ford by the LAPD is something that we're working on front and center.
And how does your organization get involved?
Well, we want to make sure that as soon as something happens that we can contact the family and give them our support as well as our condolences. So I have met with the Ford family at their house, tried to make sure I could help them do everything that was needed to be done. But also at a street level, we helped organize many of the protests that we've seen on the news concerning Ford's shooting death by the LAPD, as well as trying to make sure we monitor every step of the investigation, because that's going to be critical to make sure that Michael Ezekiel Ford's shooting death is something that just didn't happen. And we also are keeping tabs and meeting with LAPD officials concerning the investigation every step of the way.
And one thing I know that, lately, that there's so much excessive force, which I feel that it's unnecessary, and I really don't have, a police officer here to, talk about their perspective. But from your personal opinion, do you think that is it just a racial, situation?
No, I think race has nothing to do with it. I think obviously it's the culture of police violence that has everything to do with police mishandling and mistreating suspects of all colors. I can say, for example, Kelly Thomas, the homeless white man who was beat to death by the Fullerton Police Department last year. And we've also have seen other races be mistreated by the police, but obviously being African American, our community gets the brunt of mistreatment by the LAPD as well as law enforcement nationwide, who continues to racially profile black and brown suspects throughout the country.
Yeah, because one of the things that, I've always, when I look at and I see the news, my question, because like you said, the media only shows what, they want us to see. We don't see, the total, story. Do you think that it has a lot to do with resisting arrest?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I believe that officers need to be better trained in how they deal and handle suspects in police stops. One good example is we also want to make sure that our reaction is something that's proper and doesn't create more confusion and chaos. The best example I can give recently was the police stop of actress Danielle Watts, who's best known for her role in Django.
Right.
When she was stopped by the police, her and her white boyfriend were stopped in Studio City, and when the police stopped them, they were stopped because people who lived in the neighborhood had complained that they thought they were having sex in the car. So that gave the officers probable cause to stop them, and once they asked Danielle Watts' boyfriend for his ID, he immediately complied. Ms. Watts, for whatever reason, became combative, became resistant, and one thing led to another, where she initially told the police officers that you guys are putting a race card because I'm black, my boyfriend's white. In my personal opinion, it had nothing to do with that. It just had to do with the police being called to handle a stop by people who lived in the neighborhood who were complaining about what was going on in that car. So if Ms. Watts had just complied and gave her ID, that situation would not have happened the way it did, and it became more explosive.
Yeah, and when I think about that, because I listened to the tape as well, and I felt the same way. If she would just gave her ID, he would have been on his way, which led me to think in other situations when these police officers are like trigger happy. Do you think that they are afraid to work in certain gang units or areas where crime might be high, that they're just trigger happy?
Well, actually, they shouldn't be afraid. I think at the end of the day, it's our community who's been brutalized and murdered at the hands of law enforcement. It's not just locally, but nationwide. I think law officers need to just be more sensitive and just make sure when they do have suspects they're talking to, that they're respectful and courteous, and then that way the stop won't end in a potential tragedy.
Well, what are your biggest concerns when bringing these police officers that are using excessive force, which the end result is murder? What is your major concern that you're worried about, especially when it comes to helping a family member, get justice?
That at the end of the day, that family does get justice, because too often times throughout the nation, once law enforcement does use deadly force on a victim, the police officers are very rarely brought to trial and prosecuted for any crime whatsoever. So it's been a never-ending battle that we continue to fight, a fight that I've helped lead since the Rodney King days, fighting for social justice. And whether it's Reverend Sharpton, you know, my big brother and my mentor, Reverend Jackson, another mentor of mine, those are the leaders that I've looked to as far as knowing how to handle police reform here locally in the best manner possible.
And being, you know, in the community, what I see is a lack of awareness of rights. Does that concern you too? Does it?
Well, I mean, it's very much of a concern. In fact, usually every summer, my group, along with others, will conduct a workshop talking to young people throughout South LA on how to handle yourself if you are stopped by LAPD. This is done in conjunction with lawyers who are part of the legal team that we work with at the National Action Network in LA. And that way, if young people are stopped, or any citizen is stopped, they'll know their rights, and they won't make and they'll make sure that they're treated fairly.
Yeah, because, you know, when I see all of these stories, a lot of times, some of the, you know, I guess suspects, you know, you can see that they're resisting arrest. I still don't think that, you know, they're unarmed. It doesn't mean you kill them or you tase them. You know, do you also think they're just hiring anybody into the police force these days? Because I remember back a couple of years ago, they were looking for people to be police officers, and nobody was really, you know, applying. So do you think they lowered the criteria?
Well, I think a lot of it's the old boys network, where if my father or my grandfather's on the police force, then obviously that's something that I want to look into as a career. So most of the people who apply and who are eventually hired usually have family members who are already in law enforcement, and that makes it much easier for them to continue in that career field, but also is a continuation of that culture of violence that their relatives have taken part of over the years.
And how do you think that, you know, when it comes to teaching the community to know your rights, what do you think will be effective in getting the word? This is why I wanted to do the show, because it's so important to know your rights. When you're being pulled over, you have the right to remain silent, so why aren't you exercising that right? They just think, you know, oh, I'm going to say whatever it is I want to say. They have a gun. We don't.
I think that's critical. I know the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution also indicates you also have the right not to identify yourself. But I think we have to use good judgment on when we decide to exercise our rights. For me personally, if the police stop me, I always comply, because I know that at the end of the day, for whatever reason they stop me, I've done nothing wrong, and I'll continue after I show them my ID about my merry way.
Okay, so now I'm a little confused. So we have the right to not identify ourselves. That's exactly what Danielle Watts, she didn't want to give them her ID.
Well, she didn't want to give her ID, but if you don't give your ID, then obviously the interaction between you and the officer is going to continue until they can identify, you know, who you are, to make sure you're not a criminal wanted for a crime. And that's that double-edged sword where I think at the end of the day you just have to use good judgment. So for me personally, I always advise people, if the police stop you, just cooperate, and that way you won't make a situation that much more volatile.
Yes, and I definitely agree with that. But, you know, when you said, so I guess she was exercising her right, you know, not to identify herself, which it escalated.
Well, she was exercising her right, but it escalated, obviously, and I think for her to play the race card is something that we thought was just something that she should not have done. It's like crying wolf, and it just makes racial profiling that much more harder for us to advocate for real victims who are stopped by the police for racial profiling.
Give me a little bit of information on Marlene Pinnock. What's your, you know, when I saw the video, I could not believe my eyes of this woman being beat on the side of the 10 freeway.
Yeah, I mean, we're all horrified. Marlene Pinnock, a 51-year-old mentally ill grandmother, was stopped by the CHP for walking alongside the freeway. That police encounter stopped with her being beaten savagely by a CHP officer. Luckily, that encounter was videotaped, and the whole world saw just how brutally she was beaten. So for our organization, we wanted to make sure that we were a voice for justice with Dr. Olafire Hutchinson and others, to make sure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone again. Ultimately, the officer did resign, and Ms. Pinnock did receive a $1 million settlement for her injuries. So we're just grateful that she'll have the long-term care and financial resources she'll need to be successful in life.
Yeah, but no amount of money would ever change the emotion that you must have felt, you know, someone just beating you up like that. You know, I would never imagine my mother or anybody, friend, you know, going through something like that. But I'm glad that, you know, justice was served in that situation. Do you feel that you're supported by elected officials?
Well, I've been blessed over the years to have a great relationship and close friendship with many elected officials that do great work for our community. And that ranges from Congresswoman Karen Bass, who I credit my activism career. There would be no Najee Ali if it wasn't the Karen Bass. Supervisor Mark Willie Thomas, State Senator Holly Mitchell, Councilman Karen Price, Herb Wesson, and so many others are key to my efforts in being successful in South LA, because we work in partnerships to make sure that we can serve the community and help improve the quality of life for everyone.
And so what steps are your, you know, what step is your organization taking to, you know, change the laws with LAPD?
Well, right now, as we have always been for the last 20 years, since Rodney King, our whole goal is police reform, and that includes changing policies. So right now, we are still meeting with LAPD, the Inspector General Bustamante, who we've met with almost monthly at community meetings to ensure that South LA residents and others throughout the city of LA, their rights can be protected, and we can have policies that protect people, and people aren't being mistreated by the LAPD.
Now, when a lot of times when we see you out there protesting on the front line, do you think that does protesting really work?
Protest always works. It's not the complete cure for a cause, but certainly protesting and marching creates that public interest and the public outrage that helps push an issue to the forefront. And that way, the people who are in power that we're trying to get their attention, they realize this issue is not going to go away, because we're constantly in the streets making sure our voices are raised, and we're marching, taking it to the streets in the tradition of Dr. King. So I've always been an advocate for marching and taking our issues to the streets.
And, you know, do you feel that you're also getting a lot of support for the community as well?
Well, I think anytime the community sees people who are sincerely advocating on their behalf, something that for many people they don't know how to do, they haven't found their voice yet, I think they look for us to be the ones who help organize them to be out there with us to make change. And that's something that I've always thought to myself, and it's helped me make me feel real good inside that I'm actually doing something not for myself, but for my people and for my community.
Now, out of all the things that you could have been in the world, you know, what drove you to actually become an activist?
Well, I think the example of Malcolm X, El-Haj Malik al-Shabazz, and reading his autobiography, the autobiography of Malcolm X, over 20 years ago, really helped change my life, and it transformed me, where I eventually converted to Islam and his tradition. I was fortunate enough to have Imam Mufti Muhammad as my spiritual leader, who eventually became my father-in-law, who helped teach me Islam. And I know our tradition is a tradition that says we must help humanity. So for me, being a Muslim who practices Islam, we want to show people we represent the best in Islam. Islam is not a terrorist religion. We do not support or advocate terrorism, but we're a religion of peace. And the best way for me to do that is not just say it, but show people through my actions. So for me, I'm a servant of the community.
Well, I definitely, you know, thank you, because it's not every day that, you know, you have certain people that's just going to get up and fight for, you know, civil rights. I'm just now, you know, like I said, I'm going to be 100% real. I'm just realizing that it's really important, you know, to know what's going on and to turn on the news and to get involved. So, you know, as a person part of the Los Angeles community and creating this forum, what would you like to see more from the community when it comes to showing, how do we show you support? How do
I think the most important thing is dialogue. As I said, I'm a fan of your show, and I'm grateful for being on here. So this very topic of social activism, social justice, is something that we need to continue throughout the community. And I think that's the first step, is communicating. So I'm just grateful to have a platform to talk about what I do and what I hope to continue to do. So we're just anxious to get more people involved by joining organizations like the National Action Network, NAACP, SCLC, my group, and others. That way we can have a united front to fight for social justice throughout South LA.
Because I think a lot of people would be afraid to protest, afraid of, getting sprayed or, going to jail. What are some of the things, major concerns when you are out there protesting?
Well, it's always a concern. I've been arrested a few times for civil disobedience and tradition of Dr. King, but at the end of the day, I'm more afraid of what will happen if I don't protest, if the community is not engaged, if we're not out there fighting back against evil and social injustice in our neighborhoods and our community. So I think at the end of the day, you have to look at the lesser of two evils. So for me, me being afraid was never an option. I've always been fearless, and I'm going to make sure that I can inspire my community to have that same attitude to fight back, no matter where it happens at.
Well, I'm inspired, and I definitely want. I'm going to keep my eyes on you. I'm going to
keep my eyes on you too.
But I have another person that that I was looking at too. Alicia, what's her name? Alicia Thomas.
Alicia Thomas.
Yes.
Young mother from South Central LA, my neighborhood and community, who lost her life in an encounter with the police, who actually came to her apartment in South Central after she had dropped her kids off at the police station down the street from her home, because she had some issues and some problems. So she wanted to make sure her children were safe, and she just dropped them off at the police station, which common sense tells you what safer place could they be at but a police station. The police came to her home, found her, and a violent encounter ensued shortly after, where she was actually beaten and kicked by a female police officer while she was handcuffed. She died in the police car, and that is an issue that my group advocated to fight for her justice. I do know from my latest update by the DA's office that officer has been indicted and is being prosecuted for a crime.
If that doesn't make you want to, get out and stand up for something, I don't know what will, because, these are the things. Now she has kids that, who's going to raise her kids? It's just something that kind of like, breaks my heart, because I'm a single parent. And what that tells me is, don't trust the police.
Well, I think we have to be realistically, at the end of the day, I'm someone who says we can trust the police. I'm just realistic. You have good officers and bad officers. Fortunately, the majority of police officers are good officers who just want to do their job. Unfortunately, in South Central and across the nation, you always have these bad apples, these rogue officers who give police departments and their cities a bad name. So we have to just remember there's good and bad in all people.
Yeah, that is true. I'm still scared sometimes, even though I know I'm not doing anything, and I know I don't look anything like I would. But if I'm pulled over, I'm nervous, just, okay, I hope this person is not going to be a mean cop and just, want to start some mess. And I only get that because of the, recent increase of excessive force being used on unarmed individuals.
Yeah, that's understandable. I'm a black male, so every time I get behind the wheel of the car and see the police in my rearview mirror, I know my life could be in jeopardy if things don't work out, if they stop me. So I could be potentially harmed, and that's why I've always been someone who's always complied, no matter what they've said or how they've treated me, because I can always file a complaint later on if I need to.
And that's knowing what to do. So when a person needs to know what to do, they can call your organization and can get a little bit of help on what are the necessary procedures they need to take in order to.
They can call our organization for anything that relates to civil rights and social justice, along with our partnership groups such as NAACP, the National Action Network, SCLC, and all the civil rights groups in LA. We work in unity and not competition, so there's plenty of groups that your viewers can contact for help.
Okay, but you're on my show, so we're going to call you. So Yeah, so if somebody wants to contact you, email address or...
I mean, the easiest way, I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page that needs more, I need more friends.
Okay,
So
what's your Facebook?
My
Give your
Facebook
page.
is Najee Ali, Najee Ali, Ali. I'm on Twitter at Najee Ali. So I look forward to networking and talking to your viewers.
Oh, okay, great. And you know what, if you had to tell something, say one important thing, or maybe three, give some advice to our youth, black youth, or anybody out there being stopped by the police, what are the main things they should know?
I think immediately always show your hands, give them your ID, identify yourself, and comply with whatever they ask you to do. And if you feel that you're being mistreated, ask for a police sergeant to come to the scene to help facilitate the traffic stop or the police stop. And at the end of the day, if you feel you've been mistreated, contact my organization and file a police complaint, and we'll stand with you.
You heard that right from his mouth. One last thing. Do you think also that by the police officers carrying a video, that's going to change some things?
That's a game changer. I think at the end of the day, it will protect innocent people from being mistreated, but it will also protect the police officers for those who may rely on them and misrepresent an interaction with the police department. So I think it's a win-win for the police department as well as for the community. So we're advocating that officers do have cameras on them.
I think that's really important. That would probably make a lot of people feel, you know, a little bit more safe, because yeah, we do have people that would say, oh, you did this, you did that, and the cop is not doing, you know, anything. It's a shame that the good cops have to suffer for what the bad cops are doing. But I thank you for definitely coming out to talk to us today. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you, and I hope that for anybody that is looking, you know, viewing the show, which I will be posting it up later on this evening, and I'll tag you on it. And I hope I've been enlightening, inspirational, and I hope that I encourage you to get involved in your community right here, LA. So until next then, you know, hey, anything else? Any final words?
Well, thanks for having me. It was great being on your show, and hopefully this will be a long-lasting friendship.
Oh, most definitely. You know, every now and then I'm going to shoot you an email, and hopefully I get to. You have a show coming up. Can you talk about your awards ceremony?
Well, we have an award ceremony. Reverend Al Sharpton is our special guest, and it's honoring the most influential Los Angeles leaders in the community. I've been honored to be selected to be an honoree that night with so many others. So that's October 16th at the California African American Museum, and the reception is actually free. It's open to the community.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all that I have today. Thank you again for tuning in with your girl, me, your host, Tyra Jackson, and thank you for Najee Ali. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.